Good.
Okay.
So the government.
Yeah, and just how your ideas have changed as well, just how your ideas have evolved over the years. I imagine 22-year-old Eric and 36-year-old Eric might have differing views of how the government acts and maybe what is overstepping their bounds.
Sure. Um, I've seen. I started paying attention a lot to Ron Paul. Excuse me, not the son. Ron, Dad. Um, and the militarization of the police,
Mm.
and the militarization of law enforcement in general, federal too. Um, and you started to see these escalated responses to the First Amendment, um, mostly in urban areas, and I think that really started to weigh on me personally. You turn on the internet or whatever, your news, wherever you get your news, and you see, maybe not so much the mainstream, but when you see these people out in the street protesting, and you see a heavy-handed response to the protesters, but then you see the video that around the corner they're looting and there is no cops there, right? And then you hear the elected officials saying, "Well, give the looters, some space, and let them get their rage out, and but we're gonna tear gas the shit out of these guys over here, just holding some signs, and that kind of thing started to stick with me, and I'd see it more and more and more and more, and then in 2014, I saw um, the BLM doing the same thing, the Bureau of Land Management doing the same thing, in the desert, uh, far away from anybody, far away from, and I just didn't understand. I didn't understand the BLM's law enforcement authority. I didn't understand where they got it. I didn't understand why they had guns. I didn't understand why they were body slamming women on the side of the road, and all the other things that I saw. And this was close to me. This was in Nevada, where I grew up. It wasn't just online, on the other side of the Mississippi. Um, and so it sparked my interest, and I started paying attention. And really, that was the underlying reason of wanting to go. Um, you, it kept evolving as the days went on. These First Amendment zones we saw, arresting people for not being in the free First Amendment zone, when all they were doing was videotaping. So all those are violations to the Constitution, right? All those are, and more than that, they're violations to natural rights. My right to not be body slammed on the side of the highway. Um,
And just to double check, so how are you watching this evolve? Were you seeing this on TV? Like how are you getting your information
mhm.
leading up to you heading out there?
Online.
Okay.
That was really the only place. I mean, we saw it a little bit on Fox. They started talking to Cliven a little bit, but it was mostly online videos, citizen journalists, people trying to show what was happening. Um, so yeah, it was mostly online,
Hmm.
YouTube, Facebook, social media.
And it sounds like it started just really growing inside of you, like.
It did. When I saw the testimony of one of the brothers, I later found out it was Dave Bundy. But what I watched was a video of him sitting by a vehicle talking about his experience. Basically, he said he was filming. They were coming out of the desert, the BLM, in a convoy. He was filming them. They surrounded him. They beat him up on the side of the road. Uh, they had snipers above him, and uh, sicked the dogs on him, arrested him, took him to jail, didn't charge him, and let them go the next morning. So what does that tell me? That tells me they might not have the arrest authority. That tells me they certainly didn't have anything to stick, and that they're not above beating somebody up, sicking dogs on them, bringing snipers against an American citizen for doing nothing but exercising their constitutionally protected rights. So after I watched that video, I decided I was going to go. I was going to go, and I had planned to go kick over their First Amendment zone sign. That's what I even told my boss. I said, hey, I'm driving down to Nevada. He's like, why are you going down there? And everybody was watching. Everybody knew what was going on. And I said, I'm going to kick over a sign. And I'm probably going to get arrested for kicking over a sign, and I'll go to jail for a couple days, and then I'll be back. It's not exactly how it worked out, but you know, that was the beginning of it.
Now, but let me make sure I have this right, because I don't want to assume anything, because I don't know for sure. But I mean, you packed your car.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you packed at least the rifle that you ended up.
So I'm always armed, you know. That's just I'll always, even back to, you know, when I was younger and protesting, I'm always armed, you know. I believe that a sidearm keeps the pepper spray out of my eyes when I'm acting civilly and don't deserve it. So now, going to the Bundy Ranch, the morning I got up and started packing, a friend of mine sent me a link, and this was a local Nevada news outlet, and there's this man talking, and I read, it says it's Clark County Administrator, and he's speaking, and he says, anybody coming to support the Bundys better have funeral plans and a body bag. I'm like, that's an elected official speaking on TV. I look up the guy's, I look up his name and look up, who is this guy, right, you know? And he's got quite the history. And so him threatening people's lives wasn't that far-fetched. This guy had a history, you know. I'm like, here's these elected officials acting like this. What is going on? Again, back to what is going on in Nevada, right? And at that point, I saw it as them trying to intimidate people into not exercising their First Amendment. And at that point, I decided I wasn't going to be intimidated into not exercising my First Amendment. And I threw my body armor and my rifle in the truck. So that's how that happened.
And I mean, you've got a wife.
Mm-hmm.
I think you had kids at that point too, right?
Yeah.
That's a heavy decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
So in your mind at that point, what made it worth that risk? I mean, you must have known that there was a chance of physical harm to you, and you certainly knew that there was a chance of legal trouble. I mean, you even talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
So take me through your thinking, because obviously, you know, obviously your family is important to you.
Yes.
So take me through your thinking that got you to the point where you're like, the risk is worth it.
Well, in no way did I know that, you know, in a matter of a couple hours, I'd be prone on a bridge staring at federal law enforcement, pointing guns at protesters, and the whole 9 yards, right? But at the time, I mean, a misdemeanor, I figured I'd get a misdemeanor for kicking over a sign. You know, if you're going to go protest and commit civil disobedience, you better be ready to take a misdemeanor. But after reading that and seeing that, you know, it did weigh heavy. I didn't expect it would escalate to the, you know, I didn't go with that intent. It was a defensive measure. Like, I don't know who these people are and why they're saying, you know, if you're going to come here to stand in the desert and hold a sign, you better bring a body bag. But I also know that if I'm intimidated into not exercising my First Amendment and I don't stand up for the Bill of Rights, then my kids aren't going to have it. and that's just a fact of history. We've seen it, you know. If we don't stand up and defend what we have, then they're going to take it away, one way or the other. So when I think about the kids and like walking out of the house and not knowing, one, I didn't know it was going to go that far. Two, if we're not willing to stop what we're doing and take a day off of work and travel to an injustice that our neighbor is, you know, I look at it as a neighbor, right? We're told that we're supposed to be good to our neighbors, right? And be our brother's keeper. And if I don't do that stuff, but I teach my kids it, I'm a hypocrite. And I try not to be a hypocrite. So it was more about them than, you know, than walking away from them. It's for them, you know. And to this day, every time the organization gets in the truck and goes and does something, it's because we're going to keep Idaho. It's for them.
Was your wife worried?
Yeah. Yeah, she was a little worried. I mean, afterwards is when she really. But again, I mean, we had no idea it was going to escalate like that. I didn't know the BLM had an army. You know, I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know any of those things, and so it was a little naive, I guess. But I mean, I've gone to 100 protests and only one ended that way. So.
Right. How long a drive was that?
It was 12 hours, 13 hours.
Did you drive like through the night? I don't like what.
Yeah. So two friends of mine went with me. I had asked a couple friends if they wanted to go, told them I was going. That morning I got up thinking I was going by myself, but a friend of mine, Scott Drexler, called and asked if I had left yet. He's from north here, Chalice. And I said, no, I hadn't left yet. And he said, don't leave, I'm on my way. And then another friend of mine, Steve Stewart, who was at work, called me and said, hey, have you left yet? And I said, no. And he said, don't leave, I'm on my way. So it was the three of us, got in the truck, and pretty much a camping trip. You know, I did share that Tom Collins article with them so they could kind of see at least know what I knew. And they acted accordingly as well. So the three of us drove, probably got there at about 2 in the morning, 1 or 2 in the morning, and we pull up to the staging area where the stage was, and you know, they had the flags up and stuff. But here's these 2 minutes, like 2 in the morning, there's two guys welcoming people here. There's a line of cars. There's a lot of people still showing up at 2 in the morning. And so we get up to this guy, and he asks us where we're from, why we came, you know, and I told him, saw some stuff online, upset us, we wanted to come protest. Asked us if we wanted to camp. There was a big party going on over by the stage, right? And asked us if we wanted to camp over there or with the militia. And I said the militia.
Now, what militia was this?
I didn't know.
Okay, but do you know now? I'm just curious. Like,
it was more a gathering of people.
Okay.
You know?
It wasn't a particular militia.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
He just said, you know, the militia.
I got you.
Right. And so we went over there. We drove over to where he pointed, and there was a guy sitting on a gate, just, you know, sitting there, manning the gate. Asked us if we had talked to the people at the stage, and we said yeah. And that was about it. He showed us where we could camp. We set up a camp, and we ended up taking watch on the gate. The guy that was supposed to, who was scheduled, was a little incapacitated.
Now, when you say watch on the gate, what gate are you talking about for people who aren't familiar?
So there's just this gate that goes into this little area where the camp was set up. Right?
Okay.
It's right on the side of the road, on the ranch, on the Bundy Ranch, private property. And take a watch on the gate. I mean, glorified camp hosts, right? The guy that was walking through cussing because the other guy was drunk. he asked us if we would watch the gate, and we said, well, what are we doing? We didn't know. And he said, if people show up, show them where they can camp. If they're a little weird and you get a weird bad vibe, make note and let me know in the morning. Cool, we can do that. So we sat there for about 2 hours and got relieved. It was probably about 4 in the morning.
And this is you show up and like this is like right away.
Yeah, right away. So 4 in the morning, we went to bed, got up, and the word around the camp is that the sheriff was coming to speak to the crowd, and that the BLM was standing down. We were like, yeah, cool. Hey, we won. And sure enough, a couple hours later, the sheriff comes, gets up there, him and Cliven talk, but the gist of it that we understood was that the BLM was standing down. They had already put out a public report that they were standing down and ceasing their operation. Sheriff said they were leaving, and Cliven, something about an hour, guy left, he was supposed to contact him in an hour, the sheriff. Never heard back from the sheriff, so an hour goes by. He told us that they were leaving. Cliven gets back up on the stage. He says, hey, cowboys, there's a bunch of cowboys around, obviously. Said if they ain't taking those cows somewhere, let's go let them go. Figured, hell, let's go watch the cows get released, right? So all these people jump in their trucks and their vehicles, and they go up and they get on the freeway, right? I don't know where we're going. We just hop in with somebody in somebody's truck. We didn't even know. We get over to this area where everybody's pulling off the highway, right? The freeway is jammed. We start to hear police behind us. It's the highway patrol coming in through traffic, telling people to move. We get up over to where the traffic just stops moving. It's clogged. So we get out of the truck and start walking down. We see where everybody's pulling off the highway and pretty much setting up a protest on the side of the highway. Across from this is the BLM compound. At the time, didn't really know, just saw a gate and a bunch of guys with guns. And we're in between two major directions of I-15, right? So we're on one side, they're on the other. And the police are in the medium. So it looks like a protest. People are putting up flags, easy up, sitting on their tailgates, gonna hang out until they leave, I guess, right? Is our understanding. We stand there for probably about 10-15 minutes, and a lady with a telescope has this telescope set up, and she's talking about snipers. And so I walked over and I looked through her telescope thing, and sure enough, up on the mesa above us all is a group of agents. What looks like one's prone, looks like another one's in a chair with a spotting scope, tripod thing.
So just so since people are gonna be listening to this, and just so they have the right picture in their head, and so I have the right picture in my head too. So can you describe that? You said they were up on the mesa, so you guys were on the side of the highway, right? Mm-hmm. They were, and then
they were on the other side of the freeway, in the desert, up on a mesa.
And in between was what? In between them and you guys?
Their compound was off to the left a little bit. They set up this whole compound. I mean, they had
this was a temporary, like a temporary kind of like HQ.
Yeah, almost like a forward operating base, right?
Okay, because I wasn't there, so I'm trying
to. We're all the way on the other side of the freeway. They have their gates on their side of the freeway.
Yep.
So that's their area, right? Behind that is a mesa, and they have sharpshooters up there.
And then where's the ranch in relation to all of this?
About 5 miles west.
Oh, so you guys, okay, so this was, okay, I was a little confused about. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So this was, you're away from the ranch now. Mm-hmm. Their HQ is set up a ways away. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
All right.
So you look through the scope, you see snipers.
I see what I think is snipers.
Okay.
Right. Which is one. I mean, obviously, it makes me frustrated. You know that I don't like the idea of military point sniper rifles at protesters or citizens. Period. And I do. I consider them military. That's what they look like to me, right? We're allowed to have, constitutionally speaking, we're allowed to have law enforcement. It's there. The sheriff. We've come up with a process. But these guys are federal law enforcement. Quote parentheses. To me, that's a standing army, and we're not supposed to have that. But, anyways, I'll move on. They are up on that mesa, and I'm thinking, why do they still have snipers? The sheriff said they were leaving, right? That's really where my mind goes. I thought they were leaving. They still got snipers and all these guys over here.
Were they pointed? Were their weapons pointed at you guys?
It's kind of hard for me to tell. I mean, they're way up on this mesa. I'll tell you, it was far enough to where I thought if they do have a rifle up there, it's got to be a 50. It's got to be a 50.
50 caliber.
Yeah. Or something real high powered, but so I see that, and I go put my body armor back on, right? And I start to try to, there's a picture of me pointing, and I don't know where it came from, but it was shot from the police side, right? There's a picture of me pointing, and that was the exact moment I was trying to get the officer's attention and pointing at the snipers over there going, hey, why are they pointing guns at us? And so that went on for a few minutes. Here comes another lady down the road towards this protest area we're all standing from, and she says they're pointing rifles at protesters in the wash.
So in between you guys and them, there's a wash down below?
I didn't even know. So you'd have to go down about 200-300 yards down the freeway, the interstate, and you end up on a bridge, and there's a wash going underneath. Okay, so this is kind of like the back door to their operating base. Unbeknownst to me, apparently people were going down into that wash that were parking there, and so people had been filling up that wash too. We start walking down there. We're going, what wash? What people? What, we walk down the interstate, and we find ourselves on a bridge. I look down into the wash, and there's a group of protesters. I mean, we're talking, old ladies with big flower hats that say "No more BLM." We're families, kids. So there's these protesters down there with flags in the wash, and I look down the wash, and there's a gate, and there's somebody with binoculars standing on the bridge. More people are coming. He starts talking about people with guns. I take the binoculars, he hands them to me. I look down the wash, and posted up in 4 different positions behind 4 different vehicles is a lot of guys with guns. Some in multicam, some in jumpsuits, and some in regular clothes. So
they have long rifles. They carry handguns. What are they?
No, long rifles over the vehicles, over the hoods of the vehicles, pointed down the wash at the people in the wash. At the gate, there's a stack, what they call a stack. These are guys in jumpsuits, and they've got their guns, and they're right up against the vehicles, and they're right at the gate. That's what most of the pictures are of that you see, are those guys that were right up at the gate, right there. What they don't show you is behind them the 4 spots of vehicles with 8 to 10 guys behind them with rifles over the trucks on the crowd. And so we're watching that. I'll look at that, kind of do a small threat analysis. Look at my buddy and go, man, they got to be pointing their guns at us, right? I mean, we're looking at it, and obviously we're standing up on a bridge with rifles, right? And so we just stand there and watch all the people flow into the wash. They make a line in the middle of the wash, and they start moving towards the gate.
Now, are we talking about the protesters or the BLM guys around?
The protesters.
Oh, okay.
By this time, all the protesters have come from that other area. The wash is full of protesters, cowboys on horseback, and they start going up to the gate. We can hear them over the intercom. The BLM are speaking over their intercom on their truck, but it's muffled. Can't really understand what they're saying. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can. It's muffled, it's garbled, the wind's blowing. I mean, it was hard to understand what they were saying. And the people keep moving towards the fence, and they're telling them to disperse, that they'll use pepper balls, that they'll, whatever. The crowd's yelling, we're not going anywhere. You guys go home, you leave. The sheriff said, you're leaving, you leave. We're not going anywhere. It's getting tense and more tense. And they start moving closer to the gate again. So they're doing it in, move closer, stop, and they get pretty close, and I hear what I think is disperse. We've been authorized to use lethal force. And I look over at Scott and I said, did you hear that? And he said, yeah, I think they just threatened to shoot them all. And we're kind of taking that in for a second. Crowd continues to move towards the gate again. At that point, I thought they were going to shoot those people in the wash. I didn't know what the people in the wash were doing. I didn't know if they were going to push over the gate. I was mostly watching them, to be honest, because if they start throwing rocks at these guys and they start shooting pepper balls back, I'm trying to watch the whole situation, right? Never been in a situation like that before. I was scared out of my mind. But I did think to myself, if they shoot these people, somebody's got to stop them. And honestly, I didn't have a great line of fire on them. I'll be honest with you. I didn't have a great line of fire on them. I saw that crack and I saw the concrete, and we discussed it. We said, obviously, those snipers have us pegged. If shooting starts, we're probably going to be the first ones to get hit. And we acted accordingly. Now, did we keep our rifles operable? Yeah, you're damn right we did. But what else do you do? I invite anybody to go into that situation knowing what we knew, which was very little, and observing that situation, and you're going to have a choice to make. And I made mine, and luckily it worked out. I remember laying there and thinking, good God, I was shaking so hard. I said, if they start shooting these people, I'm completely useless, right? I was shaking, and but I prayed and calmed down and sat there, calm as a Hindu cow. That snapshot is 1 second. I was prone on that bridge for 20 minutes. While they interacted at the gate. And eventually the sheriff's department came in, no guns, no, in their loafers, walked into the wash and made the BLM leave. Later on, I was able to see in the discovery how that all actually occurred and what was going on the whole time. And
this was during one of your trials?
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank God for the sheriff's department. Right now, the Tom Roberts was a sheriff's deputy who was in that wash, and it wasn't the first time he made them leave. He made them leave up at the front too, because they were up there posturing in the front, and he walked up. He said, "Put your long guns away, back up. We got the front of this." And then he came down to the wash and he did it again. He saved lives that day.
Tom Roberts.
Yes, he told them stop, which is the sheriff's job. We have a law on the books. This is a law I found while I'm sitting in prison waiting for my trial. I think it's USC 19 73 or something like that. It says that the federal law enforcement, the Department of the Interior, is supposed to fully rely on local elected law enforcement if they believe that a situation is going to escalate. There's no doubt in my mind that they believed that that situation was going to escalate. I can prove it. They were legally obligated to bring in the sheriff's department. They didn't do that. Once they did do that, it totally de-escalated. Why? Because the sheriff's department's trained to de-escalate. These guys are playing army wearing combat gear, pointing guns at protesters. That's not law enforcement. That's not civil servants. That's not... Once the sheriff's department, our elected law enforcement, our trained elected law enforcement showed up and got involved, they look at these guys and they say, hey, nobody's going to shoot you. Quit pointing guns at them and get out of here. You know, that's what happened that day. That's the real story. But, so 20 minutes, I mean...
Right, so, I think we need to go back a little, because, you said, and then we made our decision, and then we kind of fast forwarded 20 minutes, but I mean, can you kind of spell out, you made your decision,
Sure.
What did that mean? What did you do? You said your rifles were, I think, operational, but I mean, like... Operable. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean, when you say you made that decision, like, take me through that. What happened then? I mean, obviously, we have the famous picture.
Sure.
But, yeah, what happened?
Well, I got down. I spent a lot of time. Before I went prone, I spent a lot of time on my knee, down on one knee. I mean, these guys are all pointing guns at us, so I was trying to minimize my silhouette, But when we heard that, and we looked at each other, and we went, did you hear that? And we both concurred that we heard the same thing. I saw the crack, and I went, man, I am not going to be standing up here if shooting starts, but I'm not going to leave either. I already looked down there and saw a kid that looked pretty similar to mine. I wasn't going anywhere. But, so laid down, put my rifle in that crack, and laid there and watched through the crack. People were talking, and I think one reporter tried to come up and talk to me while it was happening. And you know what she said? I said, I hope you're getting this. And she said, this won't even play unless you shoot somebody.
Wow.
Lord help us, right? But she was wrong, by the way. It played.
Yeah, as it turns out, yes, that's true.
But so I laid there watching. It was too far away to hear anything, right? So there was just this 20 minutes where people were coming and going from the gate, talking. Eventually they backed, the people at the gate backed the crowd up off the gate on our side, backed them up off the gate. So at that point, we kind of started to relax a little bit. I mean, we didn't jump up and go, okay, everything's fine, obviously. But a little while after that, the sheriffs came in, and we just saw uniforms. Again, it was 150 yards away. We just saw two guys walking up with a uniform that looked like law enforcement.
Right.
And the sheriffs happened to be the sheriffs, and about 5 minutes after that, the BLM. At the time, we didn't even know it was the BLM, right? Because the sheriff said the BLM was leaving. Here's these guys dressed up like Fallujah. And who are they? I remember thinking before we got to that point, when I was looking down the wash, I remember thinking, is that Blackwater? They hire private contractors? Is it, multicam and body armor and AR-15s and stuff? That does not say land management to me, right? But so anyways, the sheriff came in, and all these guys with their tack gear start to back out, and it's called a a tactical egress because they kept their rifles on everybody, right? So they back up slowly with the rifles up on the crowd, right? And then they left, and like that, I mean, they were gone, and we stood up. An old lady gave us some water, and we hung out for a minute, and then they all really left. They had to drive by us.
That must have been surreal.
Yeah, it was. Some people were flipping them off. Some people were yelling. Some people were. But me, Steve, and Scott, we just sat there and watched them. My buddy Steve, he's waving at him, saying bye. But me and Scott were just looking at him, and there was probably about 180 vehicles.
Wow.
And trucks with trailers, side-by-sides, four-wheelers, mobile command operation trailers. I mean, we were just looking at all this stuff, and that's when it really clicked. Is like they brought an army. They set up a FOB. It was a forward operating base. They were occupying Nevada. I remember seeing a meme right afterwards. It was really funny because it was Obama, right? And it said, this weekend Putin invaded Russia, and not to be outdone, Obama invaded Nevada. So, and that was, I mean, it was funny. I laughed, but it was legitimate. Like, I saw it. It was the Department of the Interior brought an army, set up a forward operating base, a command center. They had helicopters. They had mine-resistant vehicles. They had all kinds of stuff. And you're just going, what? It still blows my mind. I still tell people that, and they go, no. I said, yeah, it's all sitting in a garage somewhere, I guess. Maybe they borrow it from the FBI. I don't know, but
Now, okay, you're talking about sitting there for 20 minutes watching. So are you watching through your scope? How are you
I
sitting
didn't
there?
have a scope.
Okay.
Again, right? I didn't plan on being in that position. I'd have brought a different girl to the dance if I was planning on being in that position. Yeah, iron sights, Ciega 223. So basically, I'm just looking through the crack.
Okay, so you're just looking with your naked eye,
Mm-hmm.
kind of monitoring what you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And
So, and again, which brings us back to, I was mostly watching the crowd
right.
below me. I know there's people armed down there. I know there's angry individuals down there. I'm half expecting them to start throwing rocks at them and stuff like that. Which never happened, but so I was trying to watch the totality of the situation. The whole thing, and listening.
And I mean, what was your plan then if things went south?
So sitting there, laying there, shaking, thinking, if something does happen right now, I am completely ineffective. I started thinking, what could I really do if they start shooting people? And I mean, the most I could come up with was I could start sending rounds down there. I mean, I had nobody really. There's a vehicle